On my screen, welcome board, isn't it, online? It's the welcome board on the screen, just confirming that before I go live. Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. This will be the first of 2 webinars on the emerging proposals for the redevelopment of the derelict Cyphers Bowls Club. As you all know, the site is along King's Hall Road. Before we start today, I want to do a bit of housekeeping first. In terms of structure, the team will present the boards, running through the proposals. There's a question function below, so please feel free to type any questions in there, and we will come back to them after the presentation is finished. As an aside, the webinar is being recorded, so without much further ado, I think we can hand over to the team and go through the presentation. Over to you, Mark.
Sorry, just unmute myself. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Batchelor. I'm a planning director from Boyer. I've worked in planning consultancy for approaching 20 years now, including about 10 years working in the London Borough of Bromley, which is also where I was born and grew up, and still have lots of friends and family living in and around the borough. So it's an area I know very, very well. We have live projects in Beckenham, and excited to present this proposal to you this evening.
Hi everyone, I'm Henry. I'm a senior architect at Lipton Plant Architects. We're the architects on the scheme. I'm the sort of project architect on it. We work on all sorts of different projects, mainly in and around London. And we've done an award-winning nursery, and we do lots of residential projects. That's probably a good summary for us.
Hi there, I'm Bradley Fenn. I'm representing Fennies Nurseries. We obviously own the Bowls Club. Yeah, we're an early years provider across South London at the moment. We currently have 11 sites offering over 1,000 places to children in South London.
Hi, so this is just a little bit about the history of the area, which you may or may not be interested in, but it's something we do to all of our projects. We just sort of have a look at what's happened in the past, so that then we can try and apply that to what we're doing in the future. So originally, like a lot of London and the surrounding areas, it was an agricultural area. But then over the years, into the sort of late 19th century, it became a sort of pleasure ground for the upper classes. They'd sort of have their jobs in houses in the city, and then they'd have their sort of country house and this was one of those sorts of areas, and they were known as pleasure grounds. And they would often have a sort of very formal manor house with then formal like landscaped gardens behind, and then a further landscape behind that. And then in more recent years, it sort of developed into how you'll know it now. So more and more housing, essentially. And then the Cater Park sort of remained as an open space with lots of sort of sports grounds, etc. So just looking at the local context along King's Hall Road itself, there are lots of these semi-detached houses along the streets, and they all follow quite a similar pattern. So in these 4 images, if you look at the 2 images on the left, top and bottom, this is the sort of dominant building typology along the street. So they have these gable end projections that face out onto the street, and that gives us the rhythm of the sort of V's up and down the street. And then at the same time, there's a bit of denser development, including that the photo in the bottom right here is the building directly next door to the main site we'll talk about, which is site B on that illustration. And you'll see that that's sort of 3 stories plus a roof space. So when we get to the design later, you'll see that the proposal we've got is highly contextual in that it takes some of the density of its neighbour and then takes the architectural cues from, you know, the more dominant housing typologies along the street. Is this for you, Mark?
Forgive me, sorry. Yeah, very happy to kick off on this one. So we've got the two sites you can see here. Site A is the existing nursery facility at 62 Kings Hall Road. Originally, obviously built as a house and since converted into a day nursery. And obviously the sort of the arrangement across multiple floors doesn't allow or doesn't lend itself for particularly efficient or effective use as a day nursery. Site B is the former Cyphers Bowls Club. The club closed in 2019, but that was I think around April 2019 after a period of sort of dwindling memberships and rising maintenance costs, given the age and condition of the building, which meant that the club was no longer viable. There were proposals to develop the site back in 2015, I think, that were unsuccessful. That was proposed as a way to cross-subsidise the club, but never came to fruition. The club then closed, obviously, and was marketed by Styles Harold Williams for 6 months or so last year. During that marketing period, there were no interested parties who wanted to take the site forward as a bowls club or other sports facility, and I think the only offers made were from residential developers or nursery providers, and obviously Fennies have secured the property, including the access drive to the west, which sort of runs along the left-hand side of the aerial photograph that you can see there.
So the sort of approach we've had here is we've currently got a derelict site with this old bowls club building, which doesn't serve its purpose anymore. So what we're looking to do is to take the existing nursery, which is in, as Mark just explained, is in an old house essentially. So it's not a purpose-built facility, and we're going to build a state-of-the-art nursery on this new site at the rear, and then at the front we're looking to create some new homes, of which we're aiming for a sort of 50% affordable housing contribution in this building. So the front of the site's really about the context and just completing that street scene on a site that's currently just overgrown, sort of derelict land, and then at the rear, creating a brand new nursery that's going to be as good a nursery as it can be, because it'll be completely built for its purpose. There'll be lots of new planting and trees on the site. We've looked to stay within this tree screening on next to the park, so it sort of won't be noticeable from the surrounding green areas, and then at the same time, sort of there's another slide later about sustainability and environmental design, but that remains at the heart of everything that we're doing here. So it's all about high quality homes, good architecture, purpose-built nursery, which is very important. And then there's another slide later about the access, but we've sort of mentioned it here. So we've got a very robust access and parking strategy, so that the site really operates by itself and doesn't put any anything onerous onto the surrounding area. I think that's the general gist of it. So these are a couple of sort of images of what the housing building at the front of the site, what we're proposing it as. So if you think back to the previous slide about the context, we've taken these projecting gable end forms and use that to complete the street scene. So if you look at the image on the right, you can see how it really reflects and mirrors the sort of zigzag nature of the street opposite. But and then the image on the left shows how it fits with the scale of the context immediately next to it, which is this sort of 3.5 stories. And then it sort of sits within its own landscape of trees, some of which are existing and some of which are new. So that so everything's designed to be very contextual. So this shows the image on the right shows the sort of entrance area of the proposed nursery. So you'll see we've gone for a more natural materials. It sort of sits lower within this screen of trees, and it sort of very much feels like it's within the surrounding sort of green area. You see it's in 4 volumes. So if you look at the bottom left image, that front volume is mainly about the entrance and sort of administration of the nursery. And then the other 3 are each separate nursery spaces, which is very important to separate these 3. So it's babies, toddlers, and then preschool. And they all have access to their own private external space, which is a similar size to each of the nursery spaces. And then in the middle, there's a sort of generous circulation space for the staff and the kids to go between. So it really is very purpose built, and it suits the needs of a nursery much more than the existing building on the other site does at the moment.
I think if I can just add in a couple of points on this, at the outset of the project, what we did was we were keen to understand the existing situation just in terms of early year childcare places in Bromley and in this area in particular. So we've undertaken a considerable amount of research into that, and it shows that the most local nurseries in the area are already full with waiting lists, both for the current academic year just finished and for the one coming 21-22. Bromley has published childcare sufficiency data back in 2017, which shows a deficit of 119 nursery spaces in this part of the borough alone, with an overall significant shortfall of nursery spaces across the borough as a whole. And we've also been able to obtain some very up-to-date data as well, showing that there roughly in this area there's about 0.55 nursery spaces available per child. So we can see there's a really significant level of early years educational need in this part of the borough. In terms of the size of the nursery facility itself, that's going to have 150 places, which I think is a 77 place increase on the existing facility. Bradley might correct me on that, but I think the existing facility has 73 places and we're increasing to 150.
Yeah, that's correct.
So as I mentioned earlier, as we sort of have to these days, the sustainability and also the ecology of the scheme is really at the heart of all the design. So we've got green roofs proposed to all the buildings, which will actually increase the amount of green space compared to what we've currently got on the site, for which will promote biodiversity on the site. We'll have highly insulated walls, glazing, etc. And then we'll be looking to use some renewable energies which are appropriate to the site. And yeah, so just to reinforce that we take this sustainability and carbon footprint of this proposal very seriously.
Yeah, from a planning policy perspective, developments have to demonstrate that they will be clean, be green, and be lean, and use less energy through the design and construction, kind of maximising opportunities for renewable energy generation within a development. So, as part of the future planning application, we will have a refined strategy around the energy for the developments across the 3 kind of elements: the nursery, the residential elements at the front of the Cyphers Bowls Club, and at number 62. And there'll be energy assessments submitted with the applications just to explain exactly what we're proposing and quite how successful the proposal is going to be from that perspective.
So this is a site plan of the proposal as we have it at the moment, which I'll just talk you through. The sort of overall approach is to have a sort of robust access strategy for the new uses on the site, but then also to keep the nursery and the residential uses separate from each other within the site. So those blue arrows on the left this is sort of nursery vehicular access. So some sort of parent drop-off points and staff access. Although I think more than half of the kids that use the current nursery on the other end of the site arrive on foot or by bicycle. So that's what the yellow line represents. That's the sort of pedestrian access to the nursery. And that goes along the side of the residential building, completely separated. And then the pink arrows on the right-hand side just show the vehicular access to the residential building. So it's got its own access road, a secure private car park at the back with cycle storage, and then there's entrances front and back. But and then all the pedestrian access can be from the front of the building. And then that it just keeps the access completely separate from from the surrounding sites, and especially the road to the right hand side, which leads to that relatively new development at the back. So there's no access from that road on the right hand side. It's all directly onto Kings Hall Road. Did you want to add anything to that, Michael?
Yeah, just a couple of points, I suppose. We've given really extensive early consideration to highways impacts, recognising the nature of the proposal, particularly covering both construction and sort of the operational phases of the scheme. So when the planning application's submitted, there'll be a construction logistics and management plan that's presented to Bromley for consideration and will be consulted upon during the course of the application, just to show how the construction is going to be managed and organised, both in terms of working hours, but also looking at things like deliveries, how deliveries will be made, where they'll be made on the site, access routes, etc. All of that will then, subject to permission being granted, all of that will then be secured within planning conditions, and the development will have to be undertaken in accordance with that plan. In addition to that, we will present a transport assessment that looks at the amount of car parking that's provided for the residential element, for example, the amount of cycle parking and bin storage that's provided, just to demonstrate that the proposals are policy compliant and are acceptable in highways terms.
Just a little bit about the smaller site that the current nursery occupies. So the proposal is to turn this back into residential use. If you have a look at the building, it used to be half of a semi-detached property. The other half's been demolished at some point in the past and turned into a car park for this housing development on the right-hand side. If you look at the centre image, so we're proposing to turn this back into flats. It's a residential use, and there's a building at the rear of the garden which is currently one of the nursery spaces. So the idea is that can be a shared home workspace or gym for the new residents of this building. So it will be providing good quality accommodation for whoever ends up living there, and will take the nursery traffic away from this site, which is currently a very residential part of the street.
So I think we were just going to show here the indicative timeline for how the project will progress. So that's shown to the right-hand side of the slide. So summer 21, obviously where we are now, consultation with the community and continued discussions and negotiations with the London Borough of Bromley, leading towards what we hope will be the submission of a planning application for both sites in autumn this year, subject to permission being granted and subsequent works in terms of discharging conditions. We suspect the earliest we could get on site to begin work is the early part of 2022, with the new nursery likely to be completed towards the end of next year. But that's very indicative at this stage, and the timeline will become clearer as time progresses.
Yeah, I think that probably about wraps up the presentation we've prepared. Firstly, I want to say thank you for the project team for their time and putting the presentation together. And also thank you to everyone for attending. Having a two-way dialogue is really important to us in our consultation programme. And we're going to move into the Q&A section now. So thanks to everyone who's asked a question already. And if you haven't asked a question, ask one now. So the first one, I think, Mark, you might have actually touched upon, was how many pupil spaces does the existing site have, and how much capacity will the new proposal have? I think you might have touched on that already, but it might be worth confirming that again now.
Yeah, sure. So the existing nursery has 73 spaces, and that's going to be increased to 150 in the new nursery.
Excellent. Similarly, another question we've had is regarding the nursery. How do we know that there's demand for more nursery spaces in the Bromley-Beckenham area? I think you might have touched on this again, Mark, but maybe it might be an opportunity to clarify that here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the education department at London Borough of Bromley obviously keeps a record of the amount of early years educational places there are across the borough, and they have what's called childcare sufficiency data, last published I think in 2017, and we've obtained that. There's also some more up-to-date data that we've been able to collate ourselves, including sort of primary research, phoning up the local nurseries, etc., just to see what kind of capacity there is within those facilities. And it's through that research that we've then prepared this research report that will be submitted with the planning application that shows that there's I think it's a deficit of 119 early years educational places in this part of the borough at present, and about 0.55 early years nursery places per child. So a very long way short of where the borough needs to be in terms of early years provision.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that, Mark. That was really helpful. We've had another question in about traffic and transport, saying that the capacity for increased traffic flow during peak times, given the proposed doubling in size of the nursery, will kind of exacerbate the problem in the area. Are there any plans to manage this? Is there like a TMP in place or anything?
Yeah, sorry, I'll answer this as best I can. Our transport consultant isn't here, but obviously it's something that we can discuss further. I'm very happy to discuss further with anybody after tonight's presentation if I'm not able to answer fully. But what we will do is, as part of the planning application, we'll submit a transport assessment, and we will look absolutely at existing traffic flows in the area, and we will gain a proper understanding of the way in which the highway network operates, so that we can demonstrate that the impacts are acceptably managed. Obviously, we are promoting that people, both the residents who live in the new flats, but also the parents who come to the nurseries, promoting that they access the site and use the development in a green and sustainable way, promoting cycling, walking and public transport ahead of using cars. And there will be a travel plan submitted with the application that discusses that in a bit more detail and gives some more evidence and a bit more comfort around that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's worth highlighting again, if there's any technical questions like that that the team can't answer today, we're more than happy. Send an email into the email address and we can come back to you with the transport consultant's response, which might be more detailed. We've got another question on parking spaces. How many will the nursery have? Do you know?
I can answer this if you like. We've got 3 spaces there, but that's really just for staff, and there's no sort of Fennies. Bradley might be able to step in here, but that Fennies run a policy with their staff for environmental reasons to that their staff aren't supposed to be driving to work, and so there's good transport links to this area. The current nursery operates with 0 parking on. There might be 1 space. So yeah, there's 3 spaces there, and they're all for maybe sort of manager and a couple of other members of staff. But the idea is that it's a drop-off route mainly for any nursery traffic that's arriving by car. But as I said earlier, we've got data from the current Fennies Nursery of how many parents actually do drive their children to the nursery, and it's something like 40% or less even. Is that right, Bradley? Or
yes, so we undertook a survey of our staff and parents at both our site on the existing Kings Hall Road and also our site in Blythe Road in Bromley. and 62% of both staff and pupils currently walk to the nursery. And I believe it was only 20% between staff and parents who actually drop off by car. Obviously, with this proposal, we don't actually allow any staff parking on site, as obviously about being a greener company, we're promoting active lifestyles and promoting people to use public transport, which this site is serviced very well by. You've got 2 train stations in very close proximity, along with good bus networks nearby.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that, Bradley. That was really helpful. We've had another question come in about the time frame, saying, why is it taking so long to start the development? I'm assuming we'd all have to start it a lot sooner, wouldn't we? But why is there the time frame as it is?
That's a planning process, unfortunately. That's just as long as it takes. I think everyone would love the process to be more streamlined than that. Yeah, the time it takes to prepare an application of this nature is quite considerable. There's a lot of work that goes into it, so we can't simply turn it around and submit very quickly. So I think realistically, yeah, submission of the application this autumn is achievable. Then it depends how long the process takes once the application's in and registered with the London Borough of Bromley, and then obviously the construction piece beyond that. So I think that sort of timeline we've indicated there is probably realistic, subject to obviously permission being granted by the borough.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that, Mark. That's really helpful. We've had a follow-up question regarding the transport assessment, noting how will it be disseminated. I suppose probably, Mark, that's one for you in terms of how they put it together, how are those sort of things constructed, and how do they just sort of decide really what the outcomes are of the reports and the assessments more generally?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of technical research that goes into it, a lot of modelling work that goes into it. I don't understand the full detail of its quite sophisticated programs that transport consultants use to generate their reports to understand the likely traffic generation that would arise from any particular development, looking at the type of use, the scale of the use, etc. They will then prepare the relevant technical reports, which will be submitted to the London Borough of Bromley, and the Highways Authority and the Highways officers in the council will review all of that evidence and make sure they're satisfied that the conclusions we've reached are acceptable. And the reports are published online as well on the council's public access website. So members of the public and any interested third parties have absolutely full visibility of those documents to provide comments. And obviously we're happy to discuss them in advance of submission, and then obviously discuss during the course of the application if required.
Yeah, and I suppose that probably links back to the timeline issue, doesn't it? Making sure that all these things are done properly and done correctly, so the development, fundamentally works when you propose it. We've had another question come in on affordable housing. What will the breakdown be on a scheme of 20 to 24 units, and how many will be for social rent versus market rent?
Sure. So I'm happy to take this. We're still at the relatively early stages of modelling the affordable housing provision. We're saying 50%, but it does very much depend on the tenure that's being proposed. Given the number of units involved, if we were to look at a scheme that had a policy compliant level of affordable rent and shared ownership units, the numbers would actually be relatively limited. The number of units being delivered would be quite limited, to the extent that registered providers may or may not be interested in actually taking the units. The result would then be that the development would change into 100% market units with an affordable housing contribution paid in lieu of that on-site provision. The alternative that we're looking at is whether we could provide a different type of affordable housing tenure within the scheme, perhaps providing the affordable units as discount market rent, which can be brought to market by the developer themselves rather than by a housing association, which actually ensures the delivery of affordable housing on the site. So with that tenure, we would expect to be able to provide 50% or thereabouts affordable housing within the scheme. But this is all part of the process we're going through at the moment. So we're not able to commit to anything precisely. But once the planning application is submitted, there'll be a clear there'll be an affordable housing statement that's included within the planning statement that specifies exactly what the affordable housing offer is.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Mark. We've had a question come in about basically, I think, essentially noise pollution. noting that while outdoor space is important for children, 150 pupils, that's obviously going to be increasing the noise in the local area. Has any consideration been given to the impact on local houses?
So yeah, I'm happy to take this. Obviously, Henry will talk to the design aspects of it and the arrangement of the open spaces and how they're shielded from surrounding houses by the building to contain the noise, and he may want to add a couple of points onto that. But I suppose a couple of bits from me. First of all, the fact that actually Fennies could, given the changes to the use classes order September last year, Fennies could actually open a nursery at the site now if that was their desire. Obviously the preference is to redevelop it and provide a brand new facility. So the starting point is they could introduce the use onto the site now and have open space, play space for the children. What we'll do as part of the application is submit a noise impact assessment that just demonstrates with some evidence that the noise impact issue has been given proper thought and consideration, with any necessary mitigation included into the design so as to protect amenity of surrounding residents.
So yeah, I guess to touch briefly on the design aspects that will help to mitigate the noise, that if you look at the site plan, well, the form of the buildings are sort of cross, and then so that the outdoor spaces are all in the external corners of the building. So the building itself will, yeah, if you get to the site plan, the transport slide I think shows it best. So yes, you can see the outdoor spaces are on the external corners of this of the shape of the building, and so there's never 150 children in one place, I guess, is one thing. Secondly, there's lots of additional planting and trees and boundary treatments to the outside of this nursery, so that will help to sort of keep it in. And then thirdly, the fact the nursery is at the back of the site rather than the front, sort of it's further away from the main sort of housing at the front. And I guess if you think about the current nursery, they essentially have a back garden which is next to a whole row of semi-detached houses, so it's improving that situation. So yes, it's being considered, but as Mark says, we will need to do a noise assessment with the application to demonstrate that.
Excellent. Thanks ever so much for that, Henry. That was really helpful. We've had another question in about proximity to other kind of buildings in the area, with one attendee saying, what will the proposed distance be from 85 Kings Hall Road Flats? I'm not sure if that rings a bell to you guys. That might be one we have to come back on potentially if it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where 85 Kings Hall Road would be. I wonder if it's the block next door, as we're looking on the screen here immediately to the west, to the left-hand side. I mean, the separation there is pretty considerable. You've got a double width access drive, the footpath. Henry may have a better idea of the boundary separation from that, but I'm assuming 10 meters or so in terms of physical separation from one to the other.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere between 10 and 16 meters or something like that. It's
cool. Excellent.
There's a good gap there. Yeah,
that's great. Thanks both. This might be one for you, Bradley. In terms of the opening hours of the nursery, has that been established and set in stone yet?
So our standard opening hours are 7:45 till 5 o'clock, but then parents have the opportunity to extend and drop off early at 7 a.m. and pick up at as late as 7 p.m. But yes, that's obviously for working parents who obviously have to be in the office at early mornings and late evenings to give them time to get back. But the standard opening hours are 7:45 till 5 o'clock.
Thank you. That's very clear, really helpful. Thank you. We've had another question in about potential overlooking from, again, I'm not sure if you know exactly where the houses are, between 100 and 106, but someone's asked whether or not any kind of thought has gone into whether or not those houses will be protected from being overlooked from the new residential development.
I'm guessing 100, 106 must be the opposite on the even side of the road.
Essentially, yeah.
in which case the separation, the front to front separation that we're proposing is in line with the amount of separation provided across the rest of Kings Hall Road. You can see from the plan that we're displaying here, the amount of separation is comparable. I don't know the precise dimensions offhand. Henry may or may not, but it looks quite generous to me. Plus, you've got a good tree screen that's being retained and supplemented as part of the development across the frontage there, just to help screen the views and provide some relief.
Excellent. That's really helpful. Thank you. Someone else has come back and said, could site A be put up for affordable housing? That's the current Fennies site, I should imagine.
Yeah, I think it's all in the mix at the moment. All part of a live conversation we're having, trying to understand where the affordable housing can be provided. I suppose the challenge with Site A is that it's only 4 units, so it becomes more difficult for a registered provider to manage on their own. But all part of live discussions we're having with registered providers at the moment and others.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark. We've had another one about traffic. And basically around, will there be a 20 miles per hour zone extended around the Bowls Club? Do we know any more about that?
It's nothing that I have any awareness of, to be perfectly honest. Something we can feed back to our transport consultants for advice and comment. But as far as I'm aware, there's no plans to make any changes.
Oh yeah. Similarly, I think someone else has asked about, are we applying for a pedestrian crossing? I should imagine the answer's probably the same there then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Will there be opportunities for the community to hire the space in the nursery when it's closed? Bradley, that's probably one for you.
It's not something we offer at the moment. Obviously, all these things are up for discussion, but it's not something we currently offer at any of our sites, just because the nurseries are obviously set out specifically for the children's development and the children's learning. So therefore, to actually clear the space down and make it available to be used at weekends doesn't tend to be feasible.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Again, I think this is one that kind of falls into the transport category that we might not be able to come back on specifically now, but are there, how many have we surveyed, or do we have a projection about how many new clients will be dropping off children by car? I should imagine it might be a fair amount, Bradley. Or
again, it's very difficult to tell how people are going to drop off. We can, as part of our application, there will be details showing our catchment area for the existing nursery. Well, showing the catchment area of our existing nursery and other nurseries in general, which is typically within a 5-mile radius. You do get a lot of parents tend to walk. A lot of our parents are commuting up into town, so therefore would drop off on their way to get the train into London or something.
Excellent. Thanks, Bradley. That's really helpful. We've got a couple of questions that are quite similar around the previous application on the site where the houses were rejected. Why do we think that this application that's kind of 20+ units be accepted when the previous one was rejected?
Sure. I suppose this is a real planning question. The circumstances in Bromley at the moment are such that they can't demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land in the borough. Government requires that boroughs can annually demonstrate a 5-year supply based on allocations and planning permissions granted for housing developments. And at the moment, Bromley can only demonstrate about a 3.2-year supply of housing land. So there's a very substantial shortfall below that 5-year target. The result of that, without wanting to go into sort of huge depths of detail, the result of that is that there is a presumption in favour of granting planning permission for housing developments. That means that what might have been considered unacceptable previously is now of less relevance as a material consideration because the circumstances have changed. So housing targets in the borough have gone up significantly, and in the light of them not being able to demonstrate this supply of housing, sites like this come back again, and there are opportunities to deliver housing, and the benefits resulting from the delivery of housing and affordable housing are obviously very, very substantial indeed in that context.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Mark. That's really helpful. there's a question come in about the site potentially becoming an eyesore while works are happening. It's mentioned that some clearance works have commenced already. Is there any plans to stop kind of the public fly tipping or anything like that? Are hoardings going to go up or?
Yes, of course. Yeah, once we get further down the line in terms of with our planning application, full site security and site safety, hoarding, fences, the lot would all go up. In terms of fly tipping, we have, the reason the skips are there is because there was a number of fly tipping areas on the site that we have cleared up. Obviously, the site did have squatters for a period of time, so we did clear out a lot of the mess that was left behind by them. And that's the reason for the skips. Just trying to tidy things up at the moment. Yes.
Cool. Thanks, Bradley. We've got another one about when is the nursery going to be open? Like, what kind of days? Do we know that? I should imagine they're going to be weekends as well. Is kind of the premise of the question.
Yes, our nursery is only open Monday to Friday.
Thank you. There's another question coming in about, had consideration been given to potentially putting a 2-story building overlooking Bell's Place at the back of the site? I suppose, what's the rationale for having residential at the front? I know we touched on it in the proposal earlier, but it might be worth covering that again. Henry/Mark.
I think in short, the Bales Place, if someone can clarify, that's the development to the northeast of the site in the park. So there won't be any overlooking because there's a very tall tree screen between our development and that development. So I think there's a short answer there, and that there won't be any overlooking.
Ooh, excellent. I think there's one further question, but I'm not quite sure what it relates to, mentioning about, can you demonstrate a 5-year supply in 2016? Quite sure what that's in relation to, unless that means anything to any of you guys.
I'm guessing it's a follow-up on the point I was making about the 5-year land supply position in Bromley.
Okay, yeah.
And back in 2016, the borough was able to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land. The current issues only came to light, I think it was approaching 2 years ago now, actually. But it's a position that the authority accepts, that officers accept, and is being accepted by inspectors on appeal, but didn't apply in 2016 when actually housing targets were lower and there was a greater pipeline of sites coming forward in the borough, I suppose.
Cool, excellent, thanks, Mark. And there's one last question I think that's come in saying, so what will happen with what's there being added to regularly? Bradley, I should imagine that's something about clearance, potentially clearance of kind of debris and stuff that's there already, maybe.
Anything you do see, any number plates dropping things off that aren't Fennies vehicles, please do let me know, because yes, that is fly tipping and that is illegal.
Good answer. We've had another question from Louise who said, why are we having 1 to 2 bed flats? What about providing housing for families?
Yeah, that's me. So the housing need statistics in Bromley is very, very clear. It's set out in the local plan that the greatest level of need is for 1 and 2 bedroom units. So the design of the development is specifically targeted at where the greatest need actually exists, and that is for the 1 and 2 bed units.
Oh, excellent. And someone else has said the timeline appears to be regarding the building of the nursery. Does this mean that the residential flats proposed at the front would not be developed by Fennies, or are you only applying for planning permission to sell on to further developers?
This hasn't been finalised. We have the capability to develop out residential properties as well. But yes, we're applying for the full planning application. And at this moment in time, we would be developing out the residential scheme.
Excellent, thanks for that, Bradley, really helpful. And we've had another question come in about would we come and meet local residents surrounding the site? I think from a consultative point of view, that's absolutely something we would definitely consider. If you send an email in to the email address, and we can arrange any one-to-one meetings where necessary, really, I think. So that's the answer to that one that probably resides with me. I'll give it a few more seconds to see if anyone else has got any burning issues. But beyond that, I think thanks guys for a really helpful session. This will be put online on the website after Wednesday. Additionally, there'll be a feedback form after Wednesday. We'll obviously be capturing all of the questions and comments that have been made tonight. But if you guys want to attend the website after Wednesday, you can leave feedback on the proposals, and we'll obviously pick up on any outstanding questions. But I'd just like to say thanks to the project team and thanks to the attendees for the session tonight. It's been enjoyable. So thanks all. That probably draws it to a conclusion. Have a nice evening.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.